The vast tapestry of ancient empires, few wielded power with such calculated precision and merciless intent as the Persian Empire. Their dominance was not merely carved through conquest, but through punishment so heinous, so ingeniously cruel, that it echoed through the bones of the fallen and the fears of the living. This was not justice, it was domination, encoded in blood and suffering. From palace courts to distant provinces, fear was the chain that bound empires, and the Persians held that chain tight. What you are about to uncover is not legend. It is the grim legacy of a civilization built on the raw, unrelenting force of punishment, confined in a hollowed log with milk and honey. Among all the methods of execution devised throughout history, few can rival the horrifying ingenuity of scaphism, a punishment used in the Persian Empire that left even the most hardened minds aghast. Known in ancient texts as the boats, this method was described in chilling detail by the Greek historian Plutarch, who recounted its use during the reign of Artaxerxes II in the 4th century BCE. The victim, often accused of treason or grave offenses against the state, was confined between two narrow wooden vessels with their limbs protruding, rendering them immobile. Then came the truly grotesque element. A mixture of milk and honey was forced down the victim's throat and smeared across their exposed body, attracting insects in swarms. These substances weren't chosen at random. They were deliberately selected to hasten the decay of human dignity into a spectacle of torment. Plutarch wrote, "They poured a mixture of milk and honey into his mouth and smeared his face, and exposed limbs and the rest of his body with the same. Then, keeping his eyes always turned to the sun, they forced him to accept the decay." It is believed that this ordeal could stretch for days, even over a week, as the victim remained alive, consumed slowly by exposure, dehydration, and the relentless swarm of vermin. Scaphism was not an execution. It was the deliberate unmaking of a person in full view of nature and man. Though some modern scholars question the frequency of its use, the fact that it was documented by ancient historians and remembered through centuries speaks to the psychological impact it had on those who heard of it. Whether used commonly or rarely, it symbolized one thing: the Persian Empire's capacity for calculated terror. Traitors faced a fate sealed in ash. Betrayal in the Persian Empire was not just punished, it was annihilated, reduced to ash, both in memory and in flesh. One of the most chilling examples of this retribution comes from the reign of Artaxerxes II, where we find a punishment so deliberate, so suffocating, that it became legend through the words of the ancient historian Plutarch. In Life of Artaxerxes 16.2, Plutarch recounts the execution of Mithridates, a man once favored by the king, who later committed treachery against the crown. For this betrayal, he was sentenced to die in a manner designed to extinguish every breath of defiance. Plutarch records with solemn clarity, they confined him in a room filled with hot ash, where he met his death by slow suffocation. This was no impromptu execution. It was a calculated method that turned suffocation into an instrument of justice. The chamber, likely a sealed space within a palace or fortress, was flooded with fine heated ash. As the air grew thick, every inhalation dragged the traitor closer to death, not through a sword's blow, but by the slow creeping invasion of ash into his lungs. The heat added another layer of torment, sweat, panic, and the eventual collapse of the body's will to resist. This punishment, rare yet verified, underscores the Persian understanding of spectacle and fear. A traitor's end was not swift. It was a suffocation of body and legacy alike. In sealing the traitor's breath, they sealed his name, ensuring that betrayal would not be remembered with glory, but with ash, silence, and disgrace. Hands that stole faced the blade of justice. In the vast Persian Empire, where order was preserved through strict adherence to law, theft was not treated as a minor offense. It was an assault on the very fabric of societal stability. Persian kings, known as King of Kings, maintained their dominion through a finely tuned balance of justice and deterrence, and one of the most visible forms of punishment for theft was amputation. Historical accounts, particularly from Greek historian Herodotus in Histories, Book 1, confirm that Persian laws under rulers like Darius I were rigid, and punishment could be severe, especially when it came to safeguarding property and public trust. While specific procedural details are sparse, it is widely acknowledged that amputation, most often of a hand, served not only as retribution, but as a lasting mark of shame. The loss of a hand in ancient times was not just a physical mutilation, it was a profound social stigma. To ensure the revised script matches the original it meant economic ruin, social exclusion, and an enduring symbol of disgrace. In Persian culture, deeply rooted in ideas of honor and loyalty, the disfigurement served as both punishment and deterrent, a visible reminder to all of the price of dishonesty. This was a system in which justice was not hidden in courtrooms, but displayed in the public square. The act of severing a hand did not merely punish, it reinforced the sovereign's power and the sanctity of the law. The message was unmistakable. In the Persian Empire, theft was not just a crime against an individual, it was an affront to the king's order, and the blade of justice fell swiftly. Rebels hung high to warn the masses. Few punishments in ancient history conveyed terror as effectively as impalement, a method used by the Persian Empire to suppress rebellion and assert absolute control. This was not an arbitrary act of cruelty. It was a calculated warning to anyone who dared defy imperial authority. The Greek historian Herodotus, in Histories, Book 3.159, provides a striking example of impalement under the Persian king Darius I. After quelling a rebellion in Babylon, Darius ordered the execution of approximately 3,000 rebel leaders, and many were impaled publicly. This was no hidden act of justice. It was meant to be seen, to brand the consequences of rebellion into the collective memory of the empire. Impaling was a punishment designed for spectacle. The victim's body, elevated on a stake, became a symbol of crushed defiance. The exact technique may have varied, but the result was the same, a lingering death, often in full view of the public, designed to deter further insurrection. The towering stakes, often erected near city gates or along roads, communicated a single, undeniable truth. The king's authority was unbreakable. To the Persian rulers, rebellion was more than just a political threat. It was a direct challenge to the divine order they believed they upheld. Thus, the punishment had to be equally absolute. Impalement ensured that the fate would not inspire sympathy or legend, but fear and silence. It was justice, made visible, carved into the landscape and into history itself. Persian law buried foes under a hail of stones. In the Persian Empire, law was more than a set of rules. It was an embodiment of divine and royal will, and its violation could summon punishments designed not just to correct, but to cleanse. Among these, stoning held a distinct place as a method of execution, particularly for crimes seen as moral or social betrayals, such as adultery or sacrilege. Though stoning is more commonly associated with later empires and religious codes, there is strong evidence that the Achaemenid Persians practiced this punishment, especially under the reign of Cambyses II and Darius I. Greek historian Ctesias, in fragments of his lost work Persica, as well as accounts preserved by later Roman authors, reference instances where stoning was employed as a collective judgment upon those who transgressed deeply held norms. Stoning was a communal act, a deliberate public execution in which the community or designated officials hurled stones at the condemned until death. The act was symbolic. It was not the hand of one executioner, but the collective force of the law and society bearing down upon the wrongdoer. The condemned was often partially buried or confined, unable to flee or shield themselves, emphasizing total helplessness before judgment. This punishment served as both a moral reckoning and a stark deterrent. By involving many in its execution, stoning reminded all who witnessed it that law was upheld by unity and that certain offenses would be met with the full, unrelenting weight of Persian justice cast in stone. Enemies faced a wooden frame under Persian law. Crucifixion is often associated with the Roman Empire, but its use can be traced back centuries earlier to the mighty Persian Empire. Here, it was not merely a punishment, but as a visible mark of shame. The whip, wielded by royal officials, was not just an instrument of pain, it was a symbol of dominance. The act was often performed in public, amplifying its impact, and the scars left behind were permanent reminders of the power structure that governed Persian life. This method of punishment ensured that royal authority was not challenged lightly. Words and actions had repercussions, and the lash made certain they were remembered. In the Persian Empire, punishment was more than a tool of justice. It was a deliberate manifestation of imperial power, designed to command obedience and suppress defiance through fear and spectacle. These methods, inscribed into history by ancient historians, reveal the extraordinary lengths rulers would go to preserve authority and enforce order. They shaped not only the fate of individuals, but the very foundation of a civilization that stretched across continents. As we reflect on these punishments, we confront a vital question. Were such extremes essential to maintaining control, or did they expose the fragility of even the mightiest empires? Share your thoughts below. As Darius I once declared, "By the grace of Ahura Mazda, I am king." Ahura Mazda gave me this kingdom. Power once claimed was guarded without mercy.